Greetings, friends. Today, I bring to you a tale of intrigue and excitement. My old journals from 2B2T. I have with me here a, not that one. Here. Yes, this is the one. You see, this is the very first journal I ever wrote on 2B2T over 10 years ago. And today, I'll be sharing with you its wonders and the excitement that surrounded me at that time. Get comfortable, relax, and enjoy. All right, everybody. Today I have for you a wonderful peek into the distant past at a time where something brand new was introduced to 2B2T that very few people that I know of ever bothered to properly take advantage of. Written books. In the modern era, there is a class of player that is obsessed with collecting and monopolizing the past. These players go as far as the world border to find such delectable collectibles. Entire stashes have been made and lost off the backs of these items. These things include signs, animals, and yes, books. As I'm sure many of you are aware, written books have built up an almost absurd economy dedicated to the circulation of these leather-bound wonders. So naturally, this sort of mentality has to have a starting point of sorts, does it not? Well, what if I told you that I too, once upon a time, had a collection of my own? Only these were not books written by anyone famous. These were all books that were written by myself. My own private collection of journals, a set of 7 that I curated and maintained for nearly the first 2 full years after they were introduced, kept entirely to myself and localized entirely within 2B2T's complex digital architecture. Sadly, I would later on lose these journals to Jared during his raid on the lands in early 2016, shortly after which he passed them on to Pop Bob, who died trying to get onto the nether roof with them in his possession. They may be lost, but I had the foresight to save them into a world download and then later copy them into screenshot form, preserving them forever. And so that brings us to today. I present to you all a summary of the very first journal that I ever wrote. It was a bit crude in places, but I made sure to make use of all 50 pages available to me at the time. As these were proper journals, I made sure to write down everything that concerned me, both in-game and real-life issues and reflections. I never stopped to expect that I'd be sharing these contents with anyone, but without further ado, from this point on I will be paraphrasing most of the contents of this rather sizable book. All of the following events take place in August of 2012. Okay, so I decided to make this log to keep track of my journey back to my base. For sensitivity reasons, I won't go into details about this until I get back there. I kept this log to document both me and my brother's accounts in attempts to get back to my, what was at the time an end base, but was eventually lost to me because of Housemaster. My brother's account is just a mule account, only so far as a inventory as well as an ender chest space. First, I will explain how I got into this trouble. About 3 to 4 months ago, I had a brilliant idea to create an almost unfindable, untouchable base. This was, of course, an end base. I prepared this base with 2 other friends who eventually quit on me. One of them managed to help me locate the location of the end, but sadly he ended up losing his account not too long after this. I was able to play on this place for a good month or so before somebody found me. This person was named Ruptured Kidney. He had the exact same idea I did and turned up out of nowhere. Scared me half to death, but it turns out he was actually pretty cool. However, the fact that by pure random chance that he could stumble upon me meant that my base was not safe and that I had to take proper precautions. This meant that I took all of my valuables and put them on my main as well as onto my brother's account, where we would log out in a large pool of water for safety. For about a month or 2, we did this day in and day out, and then one day everything came to a head. And about 57 days before, so in early June 2012, I logged back onto 2B2T after the first time in months because the server had been down for 2 weeks straight. And, as it turns out, I was suffocating in stone. Through some act of God, my brother's accounts and I had been dimensionally transposed from the end back to the overworld, and we were right back at spawn where we had started. Well, it's because the end base was only a few hundred blocks away from spawn, out over the void where no one, I thought, would look. Turns out this was just as dangerous. We managed to survive and crawl our way back up to the surface, but sadly, the entire base was lost, and I was left wondering for a good month and a half. I eventually managed to get some amount of information out of both Housemaster and later on XCC2. Ruptured Kidney was kind enough to show me a backup end portal location, but upon further inspection, I utilized that end portal only to step into it, and it was like stepping into thin air. Nothing I did mattered, for you see, the end itself was entirely disabled. There was simply no end anymore. At the time, I figured it was a bug, or perhaps it was an accident. But later on, Housemaster himself informed me that the entire end dimension was considered illegitimate, and that he made it inaccessible. But in reality, as I'd find out later, he simply deleted it entirely. I was entirely at a loss, and with nothing else to do in my mind, I decided I would journey out to a far-flung place where, if newer strongholds were ever added to 2B2T, I would be able to somehow find my way back to them. After some number of days of gathering up supplies and making my way farther into the nether, I ended up on top of the nether roof, where I would walk for weeks. Originally, my goal was negative 1,250,000, but sadly, that journey seemed to be just a tad bit too long, and I did indeed go quite stir-crazy. Halfway along my journey, I discovered that mushrooms could be utilized to ensure that a good long haul was always possible. I would never starve on the nether roof. But sadly, even this journey would eat away at my psyche. And as I wrote page after page of what ideas I wanted to make real, I eventually got so cabin feverish that I decided eventually that I would just settle at an arbitrary date. The arbitrary place and time that I settled was negative 55k by negative 554k, after only a mere week and a half of traveling. And well, that was the end of it. I would later on go on to found many farms and many spots in this place, before eventually making this base now known as the Lands. So in conclusion, needless to say, the drudgingly endless repetition of the nether roof nearly made me go crazy. In a strange sort of twist, Pyrobyte's later plugin to disable the nether roof was a sort of mercy, as it did ultimately spare us the misery of having to constantly wander that endlessly flat plane of bedrock hell. Even though it felt like a betrayal at the time, he did prevent us from having to use the nether constantly for travel, constantly subjecting ourselves to what would tantamountly be insanity. Bizarrely, it made us all have to resort to thinking outside the box in times of struggle, and made everyone live a life we'd otherwise not have lived. And who knows how many bases Pyro's plugin accidentally made possible. And perhaps in an ironic twist, it made us all better players as well. The world may never know.